This might be uncomfortable, but it's necessary. Today's conversation is one that is not always easy, but it is important to have. April is Sexual Assault Awareness Month. At You Have a Purpose Foundation, we believe that no matter what someone has been through, their story holds value and they hold the power within themselves to discover and go after their life's purpose. We are joined today by Leticia Manzano,
Mhm.
Manzano from the Houston Area Women's Center. They're one of our partners. Um, this is an organization that's committed to the critical work of supporting survivors every single day. Welcome, Leticia.
Thank you.
So
Thank you
nice
for
to
having
have
me
you.
here.
Yes, absolutely. It's a heavy topic, but one that must be heard.
Absolutely.
Can you just tell us a little bit about your role and what the organization does?
Sure. So, the Houston Area Women's Center is what I love to call your local domestic violence crisis center and also rape crisis center. Just that's they're strong words, but let's not, mince the words. Let's just
Mhm.
say what we are. And in my role currently, I am the director of violence prevention and training. And so my role is to go out into the community and do work to try to educate and empower youth and adults before the violence happens. We really want it to prevent it. So that's
Mhm.
a big role at our center. It's a big part of our mission. And training, of course. We all live in a society where we don't have these tough conversations and where we shy away from them because we don't know what to do. So I train professionals like um, doctors, nurses, law enforcement. I train cadets, detectives, um, just whoever, right? Whoever wants a training on the issues of domestic violence or
Mhm.
sexual assault, which includes sex trafficking.
Mhm.
I think when I say sexual assault, nowadays people are seeing it as a more broader term. But earlier I used the word rape. It's a very ugly and uncomfortable word, but we need to say it.
Mhm.
So sexual assault does include childhood abuse, abuse as a teenager, in adulthood, and it includes what happens to men and boys. I have to say that. So the Women's Center provides services to all survivors, and we have um, two hotlines that people can call for support. And when they're ready, they can, choose to leave their situation and go to shelter, or they can enroll in counseling sessions, or maybe they have legal questions, right? So we have a variety of services that people can access to break free from the life that is just not suiting them anymore
Mhm.
when they are ready, because not everybody's ready at the same time.
Yeah.
Sometimes, as friends or family, internally or externally, we're like, do it, go. But
Yeah.
sometimes people aren't ready, and that's okay.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So you mentioned childhood traumas. What are some, including that, what are some signs or some patterns that you would educate people on to be aware of ahead of domestic violence or sexual assault?
So I think it's a long list. I spent some time working with children and youth. That's how I started at HAWC. I was a children and youth counselor. And I think the signs that parents could look for are maybe across the board developmental issues, behavioral issues, physical, like health issues.
Mm.
And it depends on the age. It depends on the age. So while a 5-year-old may be uncomfortable and anxious to go to somebody's house, because typically with children and youth and even with adults, it's someone that they know. So when they get uncomfortable to go to Uncle so and so's house, or they don't want to hug them,
Mm.
but in my culture, in the Latina culture, we're like, go give your uncle a hug or give him a kiss.
Affectionate. Yeah.
Yeah, so we have to kind of be careful around that. But when they seem really uncomfortable and don't want to go, some things happened. Maybe it's not sexual assault. Maybe they just got yelled at. But it's worth kind of exploring.
Hmm.
With 5-year-olds, they may have stomach aches. They may um, have a harder time sleeping. They may be having nightmares. With older kids, they may be acting out a little bit more, being more rebellious and, like we don't know what's wrong with them. And so I remember in the early part of my work, we would have parents who found out that their child had been abused, but their bigger problem is like, I don't like their behavior. And so they were expecting counselors to fix the behavior. And it's like, we need to fix the trauma first, and then the behavior will change.
Yeah.
Mhm.
How can somebody who maybe suspects something is going on, maybe they don't realize it's a domestic violence situation, but they know something is off. What's an appropriate way for somebody to go about asking an individual if they're okay?
Yeah, so I'm going to address the question in two ways. One is reach out for help. I said that we have a hotline, so talk to an expert on how to approach this with your child, because every child is different. Again, it depends on the age and
Mm.
what's appropriate, and we want to hear the specific situation, like what is it that makes you think that something might be happening? Let's
Mhm.
talk about that. So reaching out for support, and to experts. Not every counselor, not every therapist is trained on sexual assault and trauma. So
Mm.
it's very, very important to look for someone who can treat that issue. We've had so many clients over the years who went to this therapist or that therapist and just hated therapy because they weren't getting what they needed. You need to
Mhm.
find the person who fits what it is you're there for. And on the hotline, the staff who work are considered hotline counselors. And if not, they'll connect you to the therapist and behavioral health. But the second thing is I want to work from, because there are listeners here who that hasn't happened yet, or maybe they're not suspecting. It's important to have conversations around bodily autonomy with children and teens, because you may be listening and have, a teenager who's 15 and a 3-year-old. And so, yes, there are different ways, but starting to talk about um, healthy touch and unhealthy and who, and naming different body parts, because
Mm.
young children don't know how to say what happened if they don't have the words. So getting comfortable in having those conversations before it happens. Again, having, if you yourself are having a gut feeling like I'm not real sure about this teacher or this
Mhm.
coach, don't question yourself. Don't say like, oh, I must be exaggerating. Your gut is telling you something. Listen to your gut. Put some safety measures in place to where the child is not alone, where the teen is not alone with this person that you feel uncomfortable with. Better safe than sorry.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah. Are there any misconceptions about sexual assault or about survivors that you hear that you can help us understand?
Yes, absolutely. So, we were talking a second ago about children and teenagers, and I think that society can automatically have compassion and empathy when it's a child,
Mhm.
or even sometimes a teenager, depending on the age and the situation. But when it comes to adults, there's not as much empathy and compassion. The first thing that comes to mind is we tend to blame the victim or the
Mhm.
survivor. What did they do to cause this? And it's very interesting because most of us would say, like, no, I'm not a judgmental person. I think that we all try to do our best. But really, psychologically, what's happened is that it's really in our subconscious, way in the back. That would never happen to me because I wouldn't do this or I wouldn't do that. I
Mhm.
wouldn't put myself in that situation.
Mhm.
So, victim blaming is a big thing that we need to acknowledge and that we need to stop doing, because the only person responsible for violence is the aggressor, is the abuser. They are going to look for a vulnerability, a moment where they can complete their plan. Over 75%, and anywhere between 75% and 80% of all sexual assaults are planned in advance. So just like when, I'm dating myself, our generations were taught, stranger danger, stranger. No, no, it's somebody that and they're going to be planning it. They're going to give you that drink that spiked, or when you are in a vulnerable situation. So we really have to not blame the person, because it could be any of us. It really
Mhm.
could. And I think as a society, we don't want to think that that could happen to us, but it can.
Yeah.
It can be at any time by any person.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Well, and that was something I was going to ask you too about, is it typically somebody that you probably already know
Mhm. Yeah.
that you're being targeted
So,
by, or that a person is being targeted by?
and I think that the broader community knows that it can happen by, I mentioned uncle, grandfather. It's
Mhm.
less likely to be a woman, but it can be a woman. And when it is a woman, oh my goodness, we're like, what? This teacher assaulted this young adolescent. But let me tell you, that happens every day to girls by their male teachers.
Mhm.
I wouldn't be doing my job if I didn't call out that most perpetrators are men, including when it's a man that was sexually assaulted or a boy that was sexually assaulted. And it's not because they're gay, they are just sexual predators and they're going to look for the vulnerable person. It's about power and control. They want to overpower somebody, humiliate them, subjugate them, make them do something that they don't want to do to show, no, I'm going to put you in your place, right?
Mm.
A lot of people think it's violent sex. And I want to turn that around and say it's violence that is sexualized. So a lot of people are like, oh, they went overboard or, it got aggressive. It's very different. It's very different. And we can talk about consent because
Yeah.
probably none of us would consent for someone that, if we don't want to have sex with that person, we're not going to, or we're going to say no or try to say no or try to excuse ourselves. But if that person is going to be violent, they're going to do it regardless of what you do because they've hatched that plan,
Mhm.
right? They're looking for when you're sick, when they give you a ride home because you've been drinking, when, they make up a plan. It's very, very
Mhm.
interesting. We say the tactics, right? That domestic violence abusers use tactics. Well, so do sexual assault aggressors. They
Mhm.
have tactics to get you at your most vulnerable time or when you're the most trusting, or they will be pushing your boundaries to see if you have good boundaries or not. Like they sidle up next to you and put their arm around you, and if you're uncomfortable, but you like kind of like laugh it off, and not that that is, again, not the person's fault, but we are conditioned to be nice, right? And so it's really important to say that they're going to find the way to make you feel the most uncomfortable, and how far they can go. They're going to push a little bit at a time.
Mhm.
Um, but it's planned. Yeah.
So if somebody's in a situation where their friend, is in a relationship and maybe they're aware of something that's going on behind closed doors, um, I think people often have good intentions with comments
Mhm,
that they
mhm.
say, like, "Why don't you just leave the person?" Um, what what are some things that somebody could say in a more appropriate way, in a softer way, to a friend that is a victim or a survivor
Yeah, I
to help
I
out?
really appreciate, I'm going to call it YHAP. You have a purpose, right?
Mhm.
I really appreciate the foundation because when I first saw this group in action, it seemed like everybody cares about everyone, like there are friendships, there's closeness. And so when you are with your friend or family member who you are close with, I think bring love into the picture, instead
Mhm.
of like, oh, you should leave. I don't know why you're putting up. Like that's very strong, and it could shut a person down,
Mhm.
and make them not want to tell you things. But say, you know
Yeah.
what, I love you, and I'm worried about you,
Mhm.
and just know that when you're ready to talk about it, I'm here to listen. It takes time. I've learned that it takes time for a person to make decisions, but I want to support you in your decisions. But I also want you to be safe.
Mhm.
So I know about an organization that can help you build a safety plan. And this organization, the Houston Area Women's Center, does not tell people what to do. We
Mhm.
also don't say, hey, we have a shelter, we can get you a room right now. We listen.
Yeah.
What is it that you need? What is it that you need? What made you call today?
Mhm.
Right? And they just may want information. They may want information about child custody or divorce or child support. They're not ready to leave. They're just gathering information. And so we meet a person where they are.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. But just start with, I love you. And
Yeah.
I'm so worried about you. This is what I've seen and
Yeah.
I don't like it.
Mm-hmm.
And so start naming that person's behavior, the abuser's behavior, not how she reacts. But, what I see is that he yells at you when we're at parties. He makes you embarrassed. He says things to you that I don't like. He called you this,
Mm-hmm.
or he blames you for things that are really his fault, really making the person seem, and they are going to feel embarrassed and ashamed. And so it's also important to say, that that's normal.
Yeah.
I may be making you
Judgment-free
feel
zone.
uncomfortable. Yeah,
Yeah.
I see you look uncomfortable and just know I'm not judging you. I'm
Mm-hmm.
here to support you.
Yeah.
You're just real soft and loving.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's such incredibly heavy work that you
Mhm.
do.
It is. It
Yeah.
is.
What
I work with a lovely group of people. Yeah.
I know, and so many that have been with the organization for decades.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so again, with You Have a Purpose, on the way here, I was thinking, heck yeah, we have a purpose. Every single person, right?
Mm-hmm.
But I was talking about my supervisor, Sonia Corrales, who's the deputy CEO, has been at HAWC for 34 years. Pamela Ellis, who's the director of our residential campus, probably close to 40 years now, right?
Wow.
Celinda Guerra, who's the director of the hotline services, which includes hospital accompaniment.
Mm-hmm.
If you get hurt because somebody was physically violent to you in a domestic violence situation, we have advocates who go to the hospital. Doesn't matter if it's 2, 4 in the morning. We're there. Same for rape crisis survivors.
Mm-hmm.
If they get themselves to a hospital after a sexual assault or even a child, right? We have advocates who go, and that's part of hotline services. But
Mm-hmm.
Celinda's been around for about 25 years. Jacqueline Guerra from Legal Services, I believe 18 years. And I myself, humbly, 28 years.
Wow.
So we have a purpose.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Just like you.
So just connecting the two organizations with You Have a Purpose Foundation, we want to inspire and empower people to reclaim their story. Or is there a story or two that stick out in your mind of a survivor that you've worked with that's, reclaimed their own purpose, reclaimed their lives,
Oh,
and come out on
yes.
the other side of what maybe they've felt like this has been their identity for so long, and
Yeah.
now they're on the other side of it?
Yeah, absolutely. Oh my goodness. I have so many stories. But I'll tell you this one, and it's going to take me a minute to get there. But
Mhm.
um, when I was running a domestic violence support group for about a year while we were training new people, and just kind of during the pandemic, we had an uptick in the number of people. So we were
Mm.
providing virtual services. People couldn't come to our office. And I was running a domestic violence support group, even though I was the senior manager of the sexual assault services. But, hey, all hands on deck. Doesn't
Mhm.
matter, we're cross-trained. And so I had this client who was just meek, quiet, barely spoke up. I had to, every once in a while, I'm going to say Mary, Mary, you're kind of quiet. Do you have anything you want to share? And she wasn't ready. She wasn't ready. Finally, she started to come out of her shell and just share these experiences that she had had with her husband that were just horrific abuse stories. That's not the important part. The important part is that she also talked about how she got out, and the reason that she did it was because she had 4 children, and they were old enough to start telling her, like, Mom, we love you. You need to get out. So that
Mm.
was amazing, right?
Yeah.
And she was in support services for domestic violence for about 2 years. It took a long time. And one of the parts of the story that she said is, I called the hotline for a year. I called the hotline and I made an appointment and I talked to a counselor and I registered for services, but I didn't access the services.
Mhm.
And I would just call every time I needed to talk to somebody. And she remembered the name of the person, the hotline counselor who was most impactful. Her name is Katia.
Mhm.
And she's like, oh, I remember her. She's like, and one day she told me, Miss Mary, you've been calling, I see on your record here, you've been calling for about a year and you did your registration session almost a year ago. And just know that if you don't access the services, you're going to have to re-register. Not a big deal. But she said, okay, I'm going to go. And so she showed up to services and she went for 2 years. And I was running that group. So I'd always tell them, look, I have a group on Monday nights. It's for sexual assault survivors. I know some people here. Well, then she disclosed that she was a sexual assault survivor and she started coming to my group. And I saw the healing happen, the lift. This woman was gorgeous. And she just said she felt so ugly. You know, her husband told her she was too skinny. I mean, just this beautiful, beautiful woman.
Mm-hmm.
And let me tell you, the shocker. I show up one day to my Monday night sexual assault support group years later, right? And she's been in group with us now for like 3 years. And her head is shaved. And I'm like, oh my goodness. And her hair was longer than mine and just gorgeous. And I was like, hi, try not to, no judgment.
Uh-huh.
And she said, she's like, I have had my own rebirth. Like, okay, tell the group about it. And she said, I've been coming here for a long time, et cetera, et cetera. And she said, I was looking in the mirror and I look different. I like the way I look, but I wanted to make a change to kind of signify that I'm in a new place.
Mm-hmm.
She said, and what happened was I was having thoughts about how my husband used to wrap his hands around my hair and drag me around.
Oh my.
She's like, and so I realized that I needed to cut my hair. And she's like, I'm not having a mental crisis. She's like, this was actually a decision that I made for myself.
Mm-hmm.
And she's like, I know it's kind of radical and I know that people don't like it and people are like, oh, we miss your beautiful hair. She's like, but I did this for me.
With the symbolism behind it.
She's like, nobody knows
and
what I went through.
detaching from that trauma. Yeah.
So that was amazing to me. And let me tell you, she was sexually harassed at work during the time that we were together, and she did not put up with that mess. She was like, and I told him, you're not going to talk to the boss, the male boss who was harassing her. And she's like, and you're not going to talk to me that way. And you know what? Take your job. And she threw the keys to the office and said, and I said, I quit. Like, just from this person who wouldn't talk to this woman who was like, I did this for me and I'm not putting up with this anymore.
Yeah. Good for her.
Yeah.
Go Mary.
Yes. Go Mary.
Yeah. There's so many situations like that where professional settings, restaurant, bar, wherever you may be, where there's people that like to push the limit and they like to see how far they can go with comments, and people swallow it often. So I commend her for the courage and, standing her ground and saying, no, you're not going to talk to me like this. Yeah.
And I think one of the things that we're going to be offering a lot more is training to business owners about sexual violence and domestic violence, because they're saying things that they're keeping quiet about. We started off with, this is uncomfortable, but it's important. Because a lot of the survivors that I worked with had experienced sexual harassment, not just the uncomfortable comments, but the groping and the touching, and also the threats of violence or sexual assault in the workplace. So there's so much to talk about, but it can happen anywhere, and it's usually by someone you know. But it's important for the community to recognize it, talk about it, respond in a way that's compassionate and loving, and then refer them to the Houston Area Women's Center. So 3 R's, right?
Okay.
Recognize it, respond appropriately, and refer.
Okay. So I like closing with that, and I like closing with Mary's story, because we always want to hear a good, make sure that survivors out there that are listening know that you can turn it around. It's possible. Life on the other side is possible.
Yes.
What are some ways that other people can support the organization besides making donations?
So we are trying to reestablish our volunteer services program. A lot of people, can make that monetary donation, and you don't have to bring, a $5,000 check. If you can donate $10 a month, right?
Adds up.
the price of a cup of coffee almost.
Yeah,
Like if you drink, if you go to coffee shops
Yeah.
and get a pastry, you're
Oh,
spending
yeah.
$10.
More than $10 these days.
Yes. And so, if you can donate $10 a month, if you can donate $1,000, that's great. But
Yeah.
if you just want to do something because you have a purpose, reach out to your local women's center. If it's not the Houston Area Women's Center, I have to say there are other women's centers in our area. There's one in the Woodlands. There's one in Galveston. There's one in Humble.
Okay.
Pasadena. So there are about 11 centers across our Tri-County area. But the central one is the Houston Area Women's Center. That's where I work. And yes, we need the support. But if you're like, I have very little time, find the one that's closest to you. And you can call us on our hotline and find out which one it is.
Okay.
Yeah.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for this
Thank you,
conversation.
Marie. I appreciate you.
If this episode resonated with you, or somebody, a survivor, somebody that needs to hear this, please share the video and remember that your story matters and you do have a purpose.